The brush scraped against bronze, and Kevin Drake knew immediately that something was wrong. 20 years of archaeological digs had taught him the difference between ordinary artifacts and the exceptional ones. This sword hummed against his gloved fingers, a vibration so faint he might have imagined it, except he didn't imagine things. Not in the field. "Kevin, you finding anything over there?" Maya's voice carried across the excavation site, bright with the enthusiasm that made her one of the best field researchers he'd ever worked with. He should have answered. Should have called her over to verify the markings etched along the blade's surface. Instead, Kevin pulled off his right glove. The Ethiopian sun beat down on the dig site with relentless intensity, but his hand felt cold as he reached for the weapon. The moment his skin touched metal, the world ignited. Fire raced up his arm and exploded behind his eyes. The desert vanished. In its place, a battlefield materialized, drenched in blood and screaming with the voices of the dying. A warrior stood at the center of the carnage, bronze sword raised high, his face twisted with rage and something deeper, something that looked like despair. The warrior's mouth moved, speaking words in a language Kevin didn't know but somehow understood. All debts unpaid, all vengeance unfinished, all enemies eternal. Kevin's knees hit the ground. Blood poured from his nose, hot and copper-sweet on his lips. The visions continued, flashing faster now. Faces, hundreds of them, thousands. Each one burned into his mind with crystalline clarity, each one radiating hatred so pure, it felt like acid on his skin. "Kevin!" Maya's hands gripped his shoulders. "What happened?" "Talk to me." He blinked, and the present rushed back. The dig site, the carefully marked grid sections, the tents billowing in the hot wind. Maya's face creased with worry, her dark eyes searching his for answers he didn't have. "I'm fine," he managed, though blood still dripped from his nose onto the ancient bronze. "Just the heat. Got dizzy." She didn't believe him. Maya never believed his deflections, which was why they'd been friends for over a decade. But she didn't push. Not yet. She helped him to his feet and handed him a cloth for his nose. Kevin looked down at the sword, still half buried in the earth. The inscriptions along the blade glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. No, that was impossible. Bronze didn't glow. He was still dizzy, seeing things that weren't there. "We should catalog this," Maya said, crouching beside the weapon. "The craftsmanship is incredible. Pre-Axumite, maybe? The style doesn't match anything I've seen from this period." Kevin wanted to tell her not to touch it, wanted to warn her that something about this blade was fundamentally wrong, but the words stuck in his throat, held back by a compulsion he didn't understand. The sword wanted to be found, wanted to be claimed, and somehow he knew it had chosen him. That night, Kevin couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the visions returned. The warrior, the battlefield, the faces of the enemies, each one seared into his memory with impossible detail. He lay in his tent, listening to the sounds of the camp settling down for the night, and tried to convince himself it was just exhaustion, heat stroke, a contaminated water supply causing hallucinations. The sword lay in the research tent, wrapped in protective cloth and logged in their digital inventory system. Kevin had insisted on handling the documentation himself, claiming it was his discovery. Maya had given him a strange look, but hadn't argued. At 3 a.m, Kevin finally gave up on sleep. He pulled on his boots and stepped outside. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, silver under the moonlight. Beautiful, peaceful. Everything the visions in his head were not. A sound cut through the silence. Engines. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast from the east. Kevin's body reacted before his mind could process the threat. He dove behind a supply crate as the first shots rang out. Automatic weapons fire tearing through the camp's canvas walls. Screaming erupted from the sleeping tents. More gunfire answered. Short, controlled bursts from the camp's security detail. This wasn't random. This wasn't bandits or thieves looking for easy equipment to steal. They'd come for the sword. Kevin sprinted toward the research tent. Keeping low as bullets whipped overhead, one of the security guards stumbled past him, clutching a wound in his shoulder. The man's face was pale with shock. "Get down!" the guard shouted. "We're under attack." No time to explain. Kevin burst into the research tent and grabbed the wrapped sword from its storage case. The moment his hands closed around it, that same electric charge raced through his body. But this time, it didn't bring visions. It brought knowledge. His body moved on instinct, spinning as an armed figure appeared in the tent's entrance. Kevin's hand shot out, fingers finding the pressure point in the attacker's wrist. The gun clattered to the ground. A knee strike to the solar plexus, an elbow to the temple. The attacker dropped, unconscious before he hit the floor. Kevin stared at his hands, breathing hard. He'd never thrown a punch in his life. Didn't know the first thing about hand-to-hand combat. But his body had moved with the precision of a trained killer, executing techniques he'd never learned. The sword pulsed in his grip, warm now instead of cold. "Kevin!" Maya appeared at the tent's opposite entrance, her face streaked with dirt. "What the hell is happening?" "We need to run," Kevin said. "Right now." More figures emerged from the darkness, at least 6 of them, moving with military precision. They wore no uniforms, no identifying marks. But their weapons were top grade and their formation spoke of professional training. The lead attacker raised his rifle, aiming directly at Kevin's chest. "Give us the sword and you can walk away." Kevin should have complied. Should have handed over an archaeological artifact to save his life and the lives of everyone in the camp. That was the logical choice. The right choice. Instead, he unwrapped the blade. The bronze caught the moonlight and threw it back tenfold, blazing with that impossible inner glow. The inscriptions writhed along its surface, the ancient script rearranging itself into new patterns, new messages. The lead attacker's eyes widened. "He's touched it. Kill him. Kill them both." The world slowed. Kevin saw the finger tightening on the trigger, saw the muzzle flash beginning, saw the bullet starting its journey toward his heart. And his body moved. He wasn't Kevin Drake anymore. Wasn't an archaeologist who spent his days brushing dirt from pottery shards and cataloging bone fragments. He was something older, something forged in violence and baptized in blood. The sword sang through the air, deflecting the bullet with a sound like a bell tolling. Kevin closed the distance to the lead attacker in 3 strides, the blade moving in patterns his conscious mind couldn't track. The attacker's weapon clattered away. His arm opened from shoulder to elbow by a cut so precise it barely bled. 2 more attackers converged. Kevin met them with movements that felt both foreign and intimately familiar, as if his muscles remembered 1,000 battles his brain had never witnessed. Parry, riposte, a spinning cut that sent another weapon flying into the darkness. But there were too many. Even with whatever supernatural knowledge the sword granted, Kevin was still just a man, untrained, unprepared. The remaining attackers fell back, regrouping, preparing for a coordinated assault that would overwhelm him through sheer numbers. Maya's hand grabbed his arm. The jeep, now, behind them. Shouts erupted as the attackers gave chase. Kevin clutched the sword, feeling it pulse against his palm like a second heartbeat. Questions hammered at his mind, but survival took precedence. Maya had already started the vehicle by the time he threw himself into the passenger seat. Bullets sparked off the jeep's frame as Maya floored the accelerator. The desert opened up before them, vast and merciless. Kevin looked back at the burning camp, at the figures still shooting, still pursuing. "What did you find?" Maya shouted over the engine's roar. "What the hell is that thing?" Kevin stared at the sword in his lap, at the inscriptions that continued to shift and change, spelling out messages in languages he shouldn't be able to read. But he could. Every word carved itself into his understanding with brutal clarity. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies." He understood now. Understood what the visions had tried to show him. The warrior who'd wielded this blade had died with his vendettas unfinished, his wars unfought, his hatreds unresolved. And by touching the sword, by claiming it as his own, Kevin had inherited every single one. Somewhere in the darkness behind them, engines roared to life. The pursuit had only just begun, and Kevin Drake had just become the target of enemies he didn't know existed, fighting wars that had ended centuries before he was born. Maya drove through the night, pushing the jeep to its limits across terrain that would have terrified most drivers. But she'd spent 5 years working dig sites across Africa, and knew how to handle difficult ground. Kevin kept watch behind them, the sword still clutched in white-knuckled hands. "Talk to me," Maya said. "Those weren't random raiders. They came specifically for that sword. How did they even know we'd found it? We only logged it 6 hours ago." Kevin's head throbbed. The knowledge flooding through him from the blade came in disjointed fragments, like trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces from 1,000 different sets. The sword belonged to someone named Bahati, a warrior. Maybe a king? I don't know how I know that, but I do. Bahati? Maya's voice went quiet. "I've heard that name in the oral histories of the Oromo people. He's mentioned in passing, always in the context of great wars and great betrayals. He died angry," Kevin said. The certainty of it settled into his bones. Died with enemies all around him. And somehow, the sword preserved that, all his unfinished business, all the people who wanted him dead. And now, they want you dead. Yes. Maya was silent for a long moment, her hands steady on the wheel despite the impossible situation. That's insane. That violates every known principle of physics, archaeology, and common sense. I know, but you believe it anyway. Kevin looked down at the blade. The inscriptions had stopped shifting now, locked into a pattern he could read clearly. Names, dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. Each one followed by a description in that ancient tongue his mind somehow translated automatically. "Descendants of the 12 clans," he read aloud. "The Brotherhood of the Silent Blade. The Keepers of the Old Vengeance. These aren't just random enemies, Maya. These are organizations. Groups that have apparently survived for centuries with the sole purpose of settling debts against Bahati. That's impossible. No organization maintains that kind of continuity for that long. Tell that to the people shooting at us." The jeep crested a ridge, and Maya killed the headlights, letting momentum carry them down the opposite slope. Behind them, other vehicles appeared on the horizon, headlights cutting through the darkness like searching eyes. Kevin's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, surprised it still had signal out here. The screen showed a message from a number he didn't recognize. "You cannot run from what you have inherited. Honor demands blood. The debt will be paid." His hand trembled. "They have my phone number. Impossible." That's a satellite phone, encrypted, registered under the university's research department. How could they? Maya stopped, realization dawning. Unless they've been watching the dig site for weeks, maybe months, waiting for someone to find that sword. Another message arrived, this one containing a photograph. Kevin's apartment back in Boston. The photo had been taken from inside, showing his desk, his books, the coffee mug he'd left in the sink before flying to Ethiopia. "They've been in my home," Kevin whispered. More messages flooded in. Photos of Maya's family, her parents in Seattle, her younger brother at college. Each image was a threat, a promise of what would happen if they didn't surrender the sword. Maya's jaw tightened. "I'm going to call the embassy. Get us extracted. This is beyond anything we can handle." "No." Kevin's voice came out harder than he intended. "The moment we involve official channels, we put more people at risk. These aren't terrorists or criminals we can report to the authorities. There's something else. Something that operates outside normal structures." "Then, what do you suggest?" "We can't just keep driving through the desert forever." Kevin closed his eyes, letting the sword's knowledge wash over him. It came in waves now, easier to process than the initial overwhelming flood. Battle tactics, ancient trade routes, safe houses used by Bahati's forces centuries ago, and something else. A location, a place of power where the sword had been forged. "There's a monastery," he said, "about 200 kilometers north, hidden in the mountains. Bahati had allies there once. Scholars who understood the nature of the blade, once being the key word. That was what, 1,000 years ago? More? It's the only lead we have." Maya considered this, her expression unreadable in the darkness. Then she adjusted their course, heading north. "If we die because of this, I'm going to be very angry with you." Despite everything, Kevin almost smiled. Noted. They drove in silence for another hour, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The desert gradually gave way to rocky terrain, the first hints of the mountain range rising in the distance. Kevin used the time to study the sword more carefully, examining the inscriptions in the moonlight. The blade had been forged from bronze mixed with something else, something that shouldn't exist in any metallurgical record. The edge gleamed with a sharpness that defied the weapon's age, and the metal itself seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. More concerning were the visions that came unbidden whenever he touched the blade. Flashes of combat, techniques drilled into muscle memory through 1,000 repetitions. The knowledge of how to kill efficiently, brutally, without hesitation or mercy. This wasn't just a cursed object. It was a weapon designed to create warriors, to take ordinary people and transform them into instruments of violence. "Kevin!" Maya's voice cut through his thoughts. "We have company." He looked up. In the rearview mirror, headlights approached from 3 different directions. A coordinated intercept, cutting off their escape routes. "They're hurting us," Kevin said. "Driving us towards something. Or away from something." Maya pointed ahead, where the rocky terrain narrowed into a canyon. "That's a natural choke point. Perfect place for an ambush. Then we go through it anyway. We're out of options." Maya downshifted, accelerating into the canyon. The walls rose sharply on either side, ancient stone worn smooth by wind and time. Kevin gripped the sword tighter, feeling its pulse synchronize with his own heartbeat. The ambush came exactly where he expected it. Vehicles blocked the canyon exit, armed figures positioned on the high ground. Spotlights blazed to life, turning the canyon into a killing zone. Maya slammed on the brakes, the jeep skidding to a halt. She grabbed the handgun from the glove compartment, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. "Any brilliant ideas?" Kevin stepped out of the jeep, the sword held loosely at his side. The knowledge flowing through him suggested a dozen different tactics, each one bloody and desperate. But one thing stood out clearly. These people wanted him alive, at least until they recovered the sword. A figure emerged from behind the lead vehicle, backlit by the spotlights. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. When he spoke, his voice carried an accent Kevin couldn't quite place. "Dr. Drake, I am called Zuberi. We have much to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss," Kevin called back. "You attacked our camp, killed people, threatened innocents. Consequences of your choice to claim what was never meant for you." Zuberi stepped closer, and the light revealed his face. Scarred, hard, the face of a man who'd spent his life at war. "That sword carries debts older than nations, vengeance older than empires. You think touching it makes you its master? You are merely its latest victim. Then why not just kill me and take it? Because the curse doesn't work that way." Zuberi's smile was cold. "The sword bonds to its bearer through blood and will. Kill you, and it becomes dormant, inert. Just another piece of bronze gathering dust in a museum. No, Dr. Drake. You must surrender it willingly. Or die fighting, which serves the same purpose in the end." Kevin felt the sword's pulse quicken. It wanted him to fight. Wanted blood and violence and the continuation of an ancient cycle that should have ended centuries ago. "What if I destroy it?" he asked. Zuberi's expression flickered. Just for a moment, but enough for Kevin to see genuine concern. "Then you die. Break the blade and it breaks you. Seems like I'm dying either way, perhaps. But there are easier deaths than what the sword will give you if you betray it." Maya had moved to stand beside Kevin, her weapon trained on Zuberi. "You talk about this like it's alive, like it has wants and needs." "Because it does, Dr. Cole. The sword is more than metal. It's a repository of will, of purpose, of rage that refused to die when its bearer fell. Every warrior who claimed it added to its power. Every enemy they slew fed its hunger. And now your friend carries all of that weight." Kevin's head swam with the implications. How many had wielded this blade before him? How many blood had it drunk? How many souls had it consumed? "There has to be another way," he said. "Some method to break the curse without destroying the sword or dying in the process. If such a method exists, it died with the sword's creators." Zuberi raised his hand, and his forces readied their weapons. "I offer you one final choice, Drake. Surrender the blade now, and I will grant you both quick deaths, painless, merciful. Or force my hand, and I will make you watch while my people take apart everyone you've ever loved, piece by piece, until you beg to give up the sword." The inscriptions on the blade blazed with sudden heat. Kevin's vision tunneled, the edges going dark as the warrior's knowledge surged through him. He saw the battlefield from the opening vision in perfect detail now. Saw Bahati standing alone against an army, the bronze sword moving like liquid lightning. Saw the moment the killing blow fell, and the rage that erupted from the dying warrior like a physical force. "All enemies eternal," the inscription read. "All debts unpaid, until the last blood is spilled." Kevin understood now. The curse wasn't just about vengeance. It was about perpetuation, about ensuring that the cycle of violence never ended, that there would always be enemies to fight, debts to collect, blood to spill. And he'd become part of that cycle the moment his skin touched bronze. But cycles could be broken if he was willing to pay the price. "Maya," he said quietly, "when I move, you run. Don't look back. Just run. Kevin, don't run." He moved. The sword guided his body with precision that transcended mere skill. Kevin crossed the distance to Zuberi in 3 heartbeats, the blade singing through the air in patterns that existed beyond normal space and time. Gunfire erupted from all sides, but the sword deflected bullets as if it could predict their trajectories before they were fired. Zuberi met him with a blade of his own, a curved weapon that moved with equal supernatural grace. The two swords collided, and reality fractured at the point of impact. Kevin staggered, his vision splitting into double images. In one, he fought Zuberi in the present, their blades trading strikes faster than thought. In the other, he watched Bahati fighting Zuberi's ancestor, the same dance of death played out centuries ago. "You feel it now," Zuberi grunted, pressing the attack. "The weight of history. The inevitability of the cycle." Kevin parried, riposted, moved through forms he'd never learned but executed perfectly. "Your sword is cursed too. My family has borne this burden for 40 generations. We are the counterweight to Bahati's rage, the eternal enemy that ensures his will never rests." Their blades locked. Kevin could see his reflection in Zuberi's eyes, and understood that they were mirrors of each other. Two men trapped in a war that wasn't theirs, fighting because ancient hatred demanded it. "This is insane," Kevin said. "Yes," Zuberi agreed, "but it is also inevitable. The swords will not allow us to stop. Will not allow peace. We fight because they demand it." Kevin thought of Maya, hopefully running far from this place. Thought of everyone back home who would be targeted if he survived this encounter. Thought of spending the rest of his life running from enemies he'd never wronged, fighting wars that meant nothing to him. The sword in his hand pulsed with eager bloodlust, urging him to continue the fight, to kill Zuberi and take his strength, adding it to the growing collection of absorbed knowledge and skill. And in that moment, Kevin Drake made a choice that the sword hadn't anticipated. He let go. The blade clattered to the ground between them, its glow fading to a dull bronze gleam. Kevin stepped back, hands raised, knowing that every weapon in the canyon was trained on him. "No," he said simply. "I refuse." Zuberi froze, his sword still raised. "You cannot refuse. The curse. The curse requires my participation. Requires me to fight, to kill, to perpetuate the cycle. But I won't. Kill me if you want, but I will not be your enemy. Will not continue this war." The bronze sword on the ground began to vibrate. Its inscriptions flared with angry light, and Kevin felt something tear inside his chest. The curse, trying to force compliance, trying to drag him back into the pattern it had established over centuries. Blood ran from Kevin's nose again, from his ears. The price for defiance. But he didn't reach for the sword. "You'll die," Zuberi warned. "The curse will consume you from within if you deny it." "Maybe," Kevin gasped, falling to his knees. "But at least I'll die as myself, not as someone else's weapon." The sword's light grew brighter, more frantic. Kevin could feel it reaching into him, trying to claim what it believed was owed. His vision darkened. His heartbeat stuttered. The curse had indeed been designed with multiple contingencies, and rejection was apparently the most painful one. Then Maya was there, stepping between him and Zuberi's forces, her weapon steady despite the impossible odds. You want him, you go through me first. Dr. Cole, this isn't your fight. He's my friend. That makes it my fight. Other voices joined hers, members of the dig site security team, somehow having followed despite their injuries. Local guides who'd worked with Kevin for months. A ragged group of survivors standing against a professional military force because loyalty mattered. More than odds. Kevin looked up at them through blood-hazed vision. These people were willing to die for him, not because of any curse or ancient obligation, but because of simple human connection. And that was when he understood what the sword feared most. Bahati died alone, Kevin said, forcing the words through crumbling will. Surrounded by enemies. No friends. No allies. Just rage and hatred. That's why the curse is so powerful. Because it was forged in complete isolation. He reached out, not for the sword, but for Maya's hand. She gripped it tight, her warmth anchoring him to the present. But I'm not alone, and that changes everything. The sword screamed. An actual sound high and terrible as cracks appeared along its bronze surface. The inscriptions shattered, ancient words fragmenting into meaninglessness. The glow flickered, dimmed, died. Zuberi stumbled back, his own sword falling from nerveless fingers. Impossible. The curse cannot be broken through simple rejection. It's been tried before. Not rejection, Kevin managed, his vision clearing slightly. Replacement. The curse fed on isolation, on the belief that only through violence could debts be settled. But there are other ways to settle debts, other paths besides endless war. The bronze sword cracked completely, splitting down the center. Light poured from the break, and with it came something else. Voices, hundreds of them, thousands. All the souls trapped in the blade's cycle. Warriors who'd been claimed by the curse over centuries. They whispered gratitude as they finally found release. Zuberi sank to his knees, his face wet with tears. My father wielded this blade, and his father before him. Back 40 generations, always fighting, always hunting Bahati's heirs. I thought it was honor, thought it was duty. It was just another curse, Kevin said. Different blade, same trap. The last light faded from both swords, leaving only shattered bronze and freed souls. Kevin felt the curse release its grip on his chest, the pain receding like a tide drawing back from shore. He'd survived. They'd both survived. And the cycle was finally, truly broken. Maya helped Kevin to his feet. Around them, Zuberi's forces lowered their weapons, looking lost without the driving purpose that had defined their entire existence. What now? Maya asked. Kevin looked at the shattered remains of the ancient sword, at Zuberi still kneeling in the dust, at the ragged group of people who'd stood with him against impossible odds. Now, he said, we figure out how to live with what we've learned, how to make sure this kind of curse never takes root again. Zuberi looked up, his expression hollow. The organizations still exist. The Brotherhood, the clans, all the groups dedicated to perpetuating ancient feuds. They won't simply dissolve because the curse is broken. Then we dismantle them, Kevin said. Not through violence, but through truth. We document what happened here. Show the world what these cycles of vengeance actually cost. Give people a choice besides endless war. They won't all listen. No, but some will. And that's enough to start. The sun rose over the canyon, bathing the scene in golden light. Kevin Drake had entered Ethiopia as an archaeologist, a scholar interested in dead civilizations and ancient artifacts. He would leave as something else, someone who understood that the past's greatest danger wasn't in its weapons or its curses, but in the belief that violence was the only answer to old wounds. Somewhere in the desert, the shattered pieces of bronze that had once been two mighty swords slowly oxidized, returning to the earth that had birthed them. The inscriptions were gone, the curses were broken, the souls were free. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the children of Bahati and the children of his enemies could meet without drawing blades. It wasn't a perfect ending, There would be work to do, organizations to confront, people who would cling to old hatreds because they knew nothing else. But it was a beginning, a chance to break other cycles, to heal other wounds, to prove that humanity could rise above the mistakes of its ancestors. Kevin looked at the rising sun and felt something he hadn't experienced since touching the bronze sword. Hope. Maya squeezed his hand. Ready to go home? Not yet, Kevin said. First, we have a story to tell, and this time, we're going to make sure it doesn't get buried in the sand. Together, they walked out of the canyon, leaving the shattered swords behind. Behind them, Zuberi slowly stood, his own people gathering around him, all of them facing an uncertain future without the curse that had defined their existence. But uncertainty was better than an eternity of war. And choice, however difficult, was better than being a weapon in someone else's hands. The desert wind blew across the ancient stone, carrying with it the whispers of freed souls and the promise of a different kind of future. Not one forged in violence and perpetuated by rage, but one built through understanding, through connection, through the radical choice to lay down ancient weapons and pick up something better. Kevin Drake had unearthed an ancient sword and inherited all the enemies of a fallen warrior, but he'd also discovered something the curse had never anticipated, something more powerful than any bronze blade or mystical inscription. He discovered that the strongest way to defeat an enemy wasn't through violence. It was by refusing to see them as enemies at all.